Welcome to the podcast. It's the worst territory in the world. Personalities, history, and other stories. We know you're craving for more knowledge. Let the champions get their glory. It's the worst territory in the world.
All right, everybody, it's that time of the week. It is the best time to talk about possibly the worst territory in the world. Thank you for joining us this week. My name is Gabe. My co-host is sitting right across from me via Zoom. That is Chris Goff. Chris, how are you doing this week?
Well, good, Gabe. It's spring break week, so I'm getting ready to hit the road. So I wanted to do one of these shows before I leave. But gosh, I'm looking forward to like 5 or 6 nights with the two boys that are bored after 5 seconds of anything I do for them. So yeah. Let's speaking of bored, how many people were all pissed off last night about Mania, huh?
Oh my God. We are going to jump into that. We are going to talk about WrestleMania. We are literally fresh off the heels of WrestleMania night 2 last night. We're going to talk about WrestleMania, and Chris, we've got a great interview lined up this week. So we got a jam-packed show. So let's jump right into it. Like you said, WrestleMania happened this last weekend. And yes, of course, we will talk about the sale of the WWE that was officially announced this morning. Chris, being a former writer of the WWE, will share his thoughts and opinions. But let's jump into the WrestleMania recap, so to speak. So yeah, last night, Cody Rhodes unsuccessful in capturing the title from Roman Reigns. Chris, we've seen a lot of chatter online. I thought it was built up pretty much as well as you can build up a story pretty much nowadays to lead us to believe that Cody Rhodes was going to win last night, and he came up short. Chris, what do you think this is going to do to Cody Rhodes?
I don't know. So I thought this was a slam dunk, and every time you think something's a slam dunk in WWE, a lot of times it doesn't happen. It's a swerve, bro. Like, he's not even there. You can't blame him. I don't know. I thought it was, I guess, like, looking back now after thinking about it for 12 hours or whatever, that it did not go down where Cody does not beat Roman Reigns. It just becomes a point of like, okay, so why didn't it happen? Now, one reason that I think, Gabe, that I was just saying to you earlier that I think it didn't happen is, okay, this is right, WrestleMania, and I think this is awesome. I mean, whatever you want to say about Vince McMahon, he may be a horrible human being, but he is a fantastic businessman. Okay, he just is. And they are selling WWE Endeavor. And I know we're going to talk about that, as you mentioned, later. But I do want to say it does concurrently happen with this huge main event at WrestleMania. So was part of the reason they didn't have Cody win the fact that they wanted Roman Reigns to be the flag carrier going into this new deal with Endeavor, because he is a true, leader of the locker room, leader of him, Brock Lesnar have basically held this company together for the last few years. Of course, the Bloodline storyline has been great, but if you want to look at individuals, it's been Brock and Roman Reigns have been holding this together most of the way. Cody Rhodes, he is not necessarily what I would put a tippy top A-lister WrestleMania. Oh, he's up there with the likes of Bret Hart, Stone Cold, Undertaker. He's not, okay? And I used to say this about the B-level people when I was there, like, I always used to get my friends mad at me because when the Stone Colds and the Rocks left, then you're left with, okay, here's our champions, Randy Orton, Edge, people like that. I'm like, these guys are good. That Randy Orton's very good. So is Edge, but they're not Stone Cold, The Rock, Undertaker, Triple H, Mick Foley. They're not. And so now we've dropped what I consider to be, in my opinion, you've had John Cena was in there for a while, which of course is another huge name in wrestling, but you've dropped another level after the Edge and Randy Orton's to Cody Rhodes, which now Cody Rhodes is besides Sami Zayn, those are the two big baby faces they have heated up to be able to take a world title, Gabe. And neither one of those two in the prime of my fandom back in my childhood or my 20s, they aren't people that I could see winning a title at all then. Because in fact, when Cody Rhodes was at WWE the first time, he was a low to mid card guy at best. So maybe that's why. Maybe Vince had cold feet with him. But, I don't think when people say this was built up so perfectly, and I agree with you, the Bloodline storyline has been built up magnificently. I mean, they've told this, they've stretched it out. It's a throwback to like the 80s and 90s where you have a storyline that lasts more than 4 weeks. It's great. But Cody Rhodes has really been a part of it for only a handful of months. I mean, he came in the last couple of months. I mean, 2 months ago, people were saying, I don't know if Cody should even be Roman. It should probably be Sami Zayn. And I mean, no offense to Sami Zayn, great guy in the locker room. He's been a great character for WWE, but he's not Roman Reigns. He's not The Rock. He's not even Cody Rhodes, really, as far as just stature. So I don't know. Those are the two thoughts I had about why it didn't happen. What do you think?
I tend to agree with you. I think the crowd was really behind Cody, but we talked about this a couple podcasts ago where I said, if Cody does win, though, where does he go from there? Is it going to be a fizzle and burn type of scenario? And I could see that happening with Cody. The crowd wanted it. They're like, yeah. But I could see Cody not lasting at the top of the card. I even told my brother last night when we were texting each other, I said, if Cody does win it tonight, which I thought he was going to, he's going to be honestly, a mid-temporary guy till Roman gets it back, and then they can do Rock and Roman at WrestleMania next year. So I think part of this was the fact that the sale was happening, and then, Roman is literally in the prime. There is nobody better. There's no big money better than Roman freaking Reigns. That guy is WWE. And I would have to think that the stockholders or the people coming in, Endeavor coming in to buy WWE, they were enticed by the fact that, hey, the big marquee matchup at WrestleMania 40 has nothing to do with Cody Rhodes and everything to do with Roman Reigns versus The Rock. That's what I personally think. I think that they're like, okay, now's not the time for the coronation, quote unquote, of Cody Rhodes, but let's keep this ball rolling because he's money. Roman Reigns is drawing money. And why wouldn't you want that at the top of your card? I was emotionally invested to a certain point where I'm like, yeah, this is Cody's time. Do it for Big Dust, all this other kind of stuff. But really, at the long-term play has to remain Roman Reigns. And you can bitch and complain all you want on the internet, but it doesn't change the fact that the undeniable truth is Roman Reigns is WWE right now. He just is.
Something that I always will say about WWE is to any AEW fan or anybody likes to knock Vince or WWE or whatever's happened in the history of the company. The one thing that Vince really holds true to is his champions look like champions. I mean, they look like superstars. They look like they could go either you're a athletic wonder like a Brock Lesnar or a Kurt Angle, or you're just a superstar showman, like a John Cena or a Hulk Hogan. Rock and now Roman Reigns. These guys, they look like men. They look like guys that could kick your ass. They look like guys that could leave wrestling and become something else. And that's what, obviously wrestling has turned to that for the last, 40 years now. Who's going to leave wrestling and become a movie star? Right. And so, no offense to anybody else on that roster that we're talking about, but, Cody is in good shape. He's a good looking guy. Shape. Yeah. But outside of the tattoo on his neck. Yeah. But the fact but it's just that was a poor choice.
Bad move.
Anyway, I just think that, Sami Zayn, no matter Sami Zayn is a guy who could be champion at AEW. And that says everything you need to know about AEW. That has nothing to do with Sami Zayn not being great. Has nothing to do with Sami Zayn not being worthy of mentioning in that, he's a guy that could contend for it, no problem. But Sami Zayn at best would be a transitional guy, and that's based on his look and his just overall oozing of whatever you want to call it, the it factor. He's just not that level, and very few are. I mean, there's very few people that have that level. So there's not a knock on anybody. But, I just, after the Endeavor thing's going down and you're hearing this coming out as WrestleMania is going on, basically you're hearing about it. I'm like, okay, well, after Cody did not win, it makes sense that, okay, maybe they're like, we want the big dogs here. Yeah, like you said, we want a big matchup at 40, or we want this to hit the ground running. Endeavor takes over. Think about it. They're going to have, if this is what I haven't seen an official press release. I saw stuff that Vince was sending internally to people that work at the company. I've seen stuff like that. But until they have a huge press conference after Mania is done now and have okay, here we go. Endeavor buys into it. WWE and UFC together, blah, blah, blah. Vince is still on the board, yada, yada. Who would you want up on that dais or whatever they're going to have for people to talk? Roman Reigns or Cody Rhodes? Both of them would be fine in front of a mic, but Roman Reigns is the guy that has been I mean, on cloud nine for years now. So it makes sense from that standpoint. Maybe it's just purely bad timing for Cody Rhodes. Maybe this was like, if it was another year and this wasn't happening, it would have just fallen the way we thought. One thing that offends me is that they try to compare this to Lex Luger and Lex Express. And I heard Cornette say that, and I understand what they mean. Complete fart in church, built up. Oh, the back from injury, Cody. I get why people say that. And there is, I understand the correlation. However, Lex Luger, different era, pushed down your throats with his own bus, his Zubaz that looked like American flag. I mean, this guy was pushed for a long, long time. Cody Rhodes, not very long. I mean, I know 2-3 months in wrestling now is like 10 years back in the day, but
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I do think, but I don't think it's not the same. It's not the same thing. This is not. I don't know. I don't know what Cody Rhodes is long term, Gabe. I don't know about you. Like I think he's just what everyone like I think we've said. Who is it if not Cody Rhodes or I guess Sami Zayn? Who is the next guy that's going to be the next Cena, the next Brock Lesnar, the next Rock? I don't know. Is he even there right now? Is it going to be a Austin Theory that's 5-10 years away? I don't know. So I think people were just looking at that like, well, if not him, then who? This is going to go on for another 10 years,
Yeah, well, I mean, and you brought up a really good point. Like, Sami Zayn even admitted in an interview when he was chasing Roman and he was getting ready to have that match. He said, they were like, do you think you can be WWE champion? I think it was Ariel Helwani or, some closely knit sportscaster guy with them. And he was like, yeah, I can be champion. But I'm not, he even said, I'm not really going to be the face. He knew, and Cody, again, I think Cody is going to have a run with the title when Roman wants some time off after this sale settles. But Cody has always missed the mark by just a little bit, in my opinion. Great worker, getting better, great physique, all this other kind of stuff, but he's missing something. I don't know what that is, but like you said, Roman has that mega factor. It's just like he was anointed from the beginning and he's only gotten better. And that's the crazy part about, the whole Roman Reigns thing. But, to be honest, I think that, by the way, they just so I don't know if you saw it today, but Vince McMahon, everybody's already commented on the sale. It's official. They haven't had.
I'm waiting for the big, the big press conference, where everyone's talking in front of the mics and how this is a huge day for the history of WWE. Like who's going to be in that room, because that's going to be handpicked by Vince. It's going to be Cena. It's going to be, I would imagine, who knows? Maybe it's just Vince, or maybe it's Vince and Triple H, or maybe it's a bunch of like the big names that have been around for the last 10, 20 years. Who knows? But, I think the Cody thing really, and of course, like, I think he's presented better in WWE than AEW. And I think 100%. That's always the case. They're always presented better in WWE. It doesn't matter who you like. I don't care. If you hate WWE, that's fine, but AEW doesn't know how to present anybody.
Nope.
But not as a big deal. But Cody Rhodes lacks what I think you're talking about. In my opinion, he's always lacked some authenticity. I feel like he's sort of playing a role. He's sort of like more so than like these other guys. Like everyone's playing a role to a degree, but I just feel like he practices and says all the right things, but I don't feel like anything that comes out of his mouth hasn't been gone over 1,000 times. And some people I can't really say that does that. John Cena, when he talks, he doesn't feel that way to me. But, Cody, maybe I'm just got like a bad taste in my mouth from when he was at AEW. And I thought everything that Cody and Brandy did there was like, I don't know, just atrocious. His reality show was horrible, like all the stuff. And so to me, he's just sort of like, it's an act more than anybody else. Maybe that's what it is, but yes, I agree. He just doesn't have the same aura as a Roman Reigns. So maybe that's why. Now, with all this being said, Gabe, I did think Cody was going to win. But like I said, I also didn't know that we're going to be hearing that Vince McMahon sold out the same weekend. So we'll see what happens going forward.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the rest of WrestleMania. I watched both nights. I think I missed beginning of night 2 last night because I had more important things to do, to be honest. I love WrestleMania. It's always going to be a part of my household. I think it's
a lot of hours.
A lot of hours, though. And I did watch some other indie stuff, which we will not get into because it was bad.
Yeah, it says great things about the future. Yeah.
Bloodsport was terrible. Okay. Anyways, so night 1, I thought night 1 was the weaker of the 2 nights. In my opinion, I heard a lot of people say night 1 was the stronger night. I don't believe that to be true. Rhea Ripley, highlights of night one for me, Rhea Ripley and Charlotte, I thought was a fantastic match. I will only say this about Charlotte as to not get massive amounts of hate mail. I don't understand what's going on in her visage right now. It was she looks different than when she first started, and it was
she looks completely different than she used to look. I mean, obviously she's had a lot of surgery done, a lot of cosmetic surgery. She looks so different than she used to. It's hard to even see a picture of her from several years ago.
Yes.
Not that that doesn't take anything away from the fact that she's a very good wrestler.
No, I was just alarmed when she came out. I was like, wow, okay, that's different. Anyways, she did have a fantastic match with Rhea Ripley. I thought that was one of the best female matches, hardest hitting female matches. There was some live rounds being thrown in that match, and I thought I thought that was a really good match, really good highlight of night one. Obviously we know the Usos were they were more destined to lose those belts than Roman Reigns was, and they did to Owens and Zayn. And Owens, it's little things sometimes that surprise me. I saw Owens and Zayn both came out with PWG logos on their shorts, which I thought
is odd. They allow that kind of stuff now every once in a while, which is weird.
Yeah, I thought that was really strange. I think so. I thought that match was really fun. Logan Paul versus Seth Rollins. I thought that was going to steal the show. It didn't steal the show, but it did live up to my expectation for it, which was again kind of a little bit of a spectacle, fun. Logan Paul has no right to be as good as he is right now.
He's great, man. I heard Jeremy White and I were talking about it. He thinks that he is unbelievably great for how little he's actually wrestled. I mean, it is unbelievable how well Logan Paul has taken to wrestling. But as Ace Steel was telling me the other day, Logan Paul, Pat McAfee, what's the difference between them and other guys that they throw down into the performance center that are like 5-star athletes from other sports? These guys were fans. Logan Paul and Pat McAfee, they know how the intangible stuff, the milk in the crowd, the looking at the crowd, the emotion, they have it. These other guys don't. And it's just that you can tell they love it.
I was texting my buddy Jason, and I said, look at the little things Logan Paul does that people that have been, I told him, I've seen guys, I work in the indie scene. I've seen guys that have been working 10 years that don't get some of the things that he gets. I mean, obviously he's got a bigger platform. He's got access to all these trainers, all this kind of stuff. But when he got his hand stomped, for example, by Seth Rollins, the way he sold his hand, I was like, people just don't do things like that, unless you're a student of the game. And I continually he could be a megastar. I think if you want to talk about guys that I think can hold the mantle of a Roman Reigns, Logan Paul might have that it factor.
He could. I mean, a lot of that depends on how long they have him, how many dates, like how in it he's going to be. This is a guy that obviously doesn't need money from WWE, makes money from a lot of other ways. So how much is he going to have his foot in the water there? I don't know. That's going to be ultimately what is going to limit him on what he does in the wrestling business. But I think you talked about night one versus night two. Most people that I've talked to like night one a lot. And I think the reason why they like 1 over 2 is because of they got the happy finishes that they thought they were going to get and did on night one. You had Cena putting over Austin Theory, which the legend putting over a young guy. And then you had Logan Paul with his performance with Rollins. I don't think it really mattered who won that match. I think we both thought Logan Paul would probably win, but he did not. You get to see some old Hall of Famers like Trish and Lita out there in a fun 6-woman match.
It was
Rhea Ripley with as you talked about with Charlotte Flair. Everyone wanted her to go over, and so that was another one that everyone thought was going to happen for sure, and it did. And Rey Mysterio and his son.
Great entrances. Great.
They were. I like the hand.
Oh my God.
It was funny. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I literally, because me and my brother and my friend Jason, we do the cute, how many stars would that match be, after every match is over. I gave it a higher rating because of how much I loved Dom coming out in the correction thing and being unhandcuffed. It made me laugh. I was like, this is great. This is great. And, say what you want about Dominic. I thought he was worthless a couple of years ago. he's getting heat. The kid has something. Is he going to be Rey Mysterio? No, but he's got something.
He's, you talk about it, as a baby face, nothing, but nothing. As a sniveling heel, really good. I mean, it's a lot easier to be a sniveling heel than it is a baby face. Yes. Everyone in wrestling always wants to be a heel because it's so much more fun to be the guy that can do all the bad stuff and do all that. But it's really hard to get over as a baby face. You have to be very good. And, he's not his dad, and you're always going to be compared to that. So why not take him completely opposite of what his dad was? And that's what they've done. And it's worked. And you knew he was going to put a lot of effort in this match because of his son. So I didn't know who was going to win that match either, but it didn't matter to me. And Ray ended up winning that. And like you said, the Usos dropped the titles to Owens and Zayn. So I think everyone likes night one because they got all the pomp and circumstance, the great entrances, and the finishes as they wanted. And then night two, not so much.
Actually, now that you mention it, there was more trash matches on night two. So yeah, I actually can see why night one was better, honestly. But the standout matches on night two I think were slightly better. Well, no, yeah, you know what? Night one was better. I'm changing my tune. Like now that I'm thinking about it, because let's get to night two. I'm going to start off by saying I thought the Finn Balor Edge Hell in the Cell was the worst Hell in the Cell I've ever seen. There's not even a close second.
Come on, kettle in a cell. Nothing's going to be worse than that.
Okay, well, okay, good point. And
Boss Man Al Snow, dogs crapping. Yeah,
and also the Bray Wyatt Seth Rollins Hell in the Cell was really bad too.
But look, every Hell in the Cell has sucked since Mick Foley ruined it. That's just how it is. No other Hell in the Cell. They just should throw that out. It's a dumb match now. Plus, I hate having a Hell in the Cell on Mania because you don't need it at Mania. You could have just a singles, maybe have some stipulation other than the one that you could build a complete pay-per-view around, which they do or have. But I just didn't think that was necessary.
And let's be real, dude. Without blood, what's the point?
I just think they should probably get rid of Hell in the Cell.
Yeah. And when Balor gets busted open and they stop the match, and I promise you, I know a decent amount about the inner workings of pro wrestling. They took it home early because of the cut.
Sure. And it was pretty bad.
And it was so bad. That was the worst match of the weekend for me because you got this, I'm going to take you on in Hell in the Cell, and the demons coming back, and it was all utter trash. I hated that match with a fiery passion of a thousand suns. I'm
trying to understand why you thought night two was better. Only because of your boy Walter getting the win.
We'll talk about that in a minute. No, I told you I changed my mind. Night one was better. Better.
Okay.
Night one was, yeah, because I started thinking about it and I'm like, no, there was some real trash on night two. Some Omos and Lesnar, trash. But what did you expect?
4-way tag match with the women?
Yeah, trash. And I can't say that the worst match on night one was like the women's match, and that wasn't even trash. It was just okay. You know what I mean? It was just like
a let me up match. It's a 6-woman tag between Logan Paul and the Mysterio things. I mean, look, this is the kind of stuff, as I've told you, drives me nuts about Dave Meltzer. I mean, he would completely crap on a match like that. Mostly, maybe with women, he'd put it over more. But I think those are the kind of matches you need. He always drives me nuts because he doesn't ever like the popcorn match, whatever you want to call it. He doesn't like the break in between big matches that either have a big storyline or lots of action. He wants it all to be that, which to me is just by half the night you're tired as an audience member because you're like give me some time to go up and down. That's what I like.
But the match of the night was Walter, Sheamus, and Gunther, Sheamus, and Drew McIntyre. That was the match of the night for me. That match was fantastic as far as a strict wrestling perspective goes. That those guys delivered on every single, all three of them delivered on every conceivable level. I loved that match.
I gotta give it to Sheamus because this dude, I mean, Drew McIntyre even had time away for a while when he went to TNA or whatever, but Sheamus has been there forever and he continues to do a really good job. I mean, he's always, and in these matches where they're just brutal matches, he's had some great matches leading into this, and this was another one. So I'll give him credit, man.
Yeah, it was that to me, and I really enjoyed the Bianca Belair Asuka match. I thought they were trying to do a little too much in that match, but I enjoyed that match. And then the main event, as we've discussed, I mean, what a spectacle! Still a really good match, even with all the almost dusty finish quality to it, which I thought was kind of funny. Best part of the night.
No, what are you going to say? What are you going to say?
I was going to say the best part of the night was Shane tearing his.
Stop. Don't say that. I felt so bad. Oh, man. Shane McMahon was my first real boss in my adult life. And Shane McMahon, and I've said this a million times, but he is one of the most athletic dudes I've ever seen.
Sure.
Shane McMahon, honestly, I mean, I know he's 50-something now, but he could, in his prime, and maybe even still, he could beat up like most of the people in the locker room. Like he is an extremely tough kid. And then after you sort of see the way he grew up and probably got tons of crap living with Vince and, being the poster child for silver spoon in his mouth kid, I think he obviously took the path of, well, I'm just going to get real tough and learn how to kill and choke people. So that's what he did. And he was great at being able to, I mean, he was super athletic. So when I saw him in that, do a leapfrog and then his leg just buckles and just goes down like a spaghetti, and you're like, okay, ACL or hand, so it's a quad, I guess.
Yeah.
So he tears his quad like his father, which is his father, when he did it, he was older, right? So Vince
see, even you're laughing because you know the irony there with the tearing of the
why
quad.
I'm laughing is that I'd like to have seen Vince and Gorilla when that happened and what his response was. He was either like, oh my God, no, or he was laughing like, ha, that's my boy. Like, I don't know, because either way would be totally normal for Vince to act. So I can't see what I can, like, I could see the demonic laugh of Vince laughing at his son for tearing his quad in a huge moment like that, much like Vince did at Royal Rumble years ago. So I don't know. That's what makes me laugh about it. But I felt horrible for him because knowing Shane's competitive level, I mean, he had to have been so pissed and upset about that, obviously.
Yeah. And everyone says that Shane is renowned, like loved. Like people love Shane. They're always like, best McMahon is Shane. People inside the business always say best McMahon is Shane. Like, he's
definitely the nicest and the most down to earth of the McMahons that I dealt with. Definitely.
Yeah. So, I mean, but overall, I love WrestleMania. Nothing will ever take this shine off of it for me completely. I love it. It's the best of our business. It really is. And it always has been, always will be, except for the COVID era one. That one was really bad. Anyway, but so let's talk real quick before we get to this interview. Let's talk real quick about the sale, Chris. It was announced, like you said, a lot of people were predicting that the sale would probably happen WrestleMania weekend because all the revenue coming in, really all eyes are on WWE. So why not announce the sale then? Endeavor, the parent company of UFC, has apparently in the sale will be finalized at the end of 2023. And the combined assets for both companies totaled to be $21 billion. Something like $9 billion for WWE purchase. It is now no longer a family-owned company after 70 years. It hasn't been really since it went public, but that's a whole different thing.
Sure.
So what do you think about the sale? Being someone that worked for WWE, obviously we're not shocked by this. Is this going to change the model of the business?
Oh, I'm sure it will. I mean, like, I think there's some sadness a little bit. No, and you're right. The business and everything has changed at WWF, WWE when they went to private to public. I mean, that day I was with the company then, and that was a huge moment. Obviously, they got a ton of cash flow. After watching what has happened with Vince and building this company and seeing how like a huge businessman takes step by step throughout the stages of his life. I mean, I think it was, I think we get lost in looking at it through a fan's eye as opposed to what Vince is and really a super competitive businessman. They're completely different. When I was a fan, as an employee there, I was sad when we went public because we had a lot more masters to talk to now. We could, before when the company's private, we could write and do stuff for USA Network and no one really had anything to say about it except
whoever was going to be the liaison for USA Network and the McMahon family. Now, after the public sale, gosh, man, they had to change a lot. Of course, the PG era happened, and just like you said, the blood. There's just a lot more. It's like it's not as bad as when WCW was on TBS, or TNT, but it's getting more and more that way from a corporate structure and what they're going to have limitations on them for. Now, this Endeavor sale, it's sort of like the next logical step for Vince. Obviously, I don't know what all the infighting is with the family. Of course, Shane's back. We never got a real understanding of what happened fully with that whole debacle that happened when he was fired by his father for the Royal Rumble and all that. And then you don't hear anything about Shane forever. And now he's back again. Stephanie has resigned and retired, or whatever she called that. Triple H is still there. Linda, who has to obviously be mortified for the 100th time Vince has been busted for, being with other women and brought to the forefront of the media again. So, it's such a weird dynamic there that this is probably the only way that it would have been good for his entire family going forward. They're all going to get paid out a lot of money. And now you have a big conglomerate corporation that's going to be handling things. It's just sad, I think most of the fans are sort of sad that we now live in a world where the McMahons don't own the biggest wrestling company in the world, because that's all we've known in our life. But it makes a ton of sense, and really, I don't know how Vince could have not had a bigger win in all of this. I mean, he not only gets an evaluation of $9 billion, which he was asking for $6 billion, and everybody was scoffing at that. But now I don't really know how this is going to get paid out. I don't know if it's all stock, if it's all money. Like, he's still on the board. He's second in command, right? I think it's.
I was going to say, I have those answers for you, but yeah. He says he's not going to be involved in creative on a micro level, but on a macro level, big decisions. Yeah. And he's remaining on the board. Nick Khan is going to be the president still. So basically the corporate structure is staying the same.
Yeah. And so he gets to keep his job, which he thought he lost a year ago or whatever, less than that. And now he's back. I don't like his hair job, dye job, and his mustache. That is really weird for Vince to have a mustache now. I mean, he has always been so anti-facial hair.
He looks like Vincent Price. It's super weird.
Yeah, Clark Gable. I've had a lot of people what they thought he looked like. It's just, Vince has always been really into his grooming. Like, he's been super into it. So it's weird to see him now. But who knows what's going through his life? He knows that he's in his mid to high 70s now, and I don't know. He's obviously throwing all caution to the wind. But I don't know how he could have made out in this any better. I guess the only answer would be, well, just leave it to his kids and his grandkid, I guess. But you know what?
But now he's leaving him a stack of cash.
He left him a ton of money, and no one's ever going to put the heart and love and the crazy desire that he had into it ever. His children, no matter what you want to say about Stephanie or Shane, they're never going to have, and I saw it, they're never going to have what their dad had, because they didn't have to do what their dad did. So, my own dad had a company. I wasn't going to be as good at running my dad's company as he was, because it was his baby. And so I don't know. It's sad from a standpoint of like it's over. The McMahons aren't the family anymore, but they still sort of are. So it's I don't know. It couldn't have worked better. And he got his job back, and he's like top of the heap again. So good for them, man. And I guess Shane and him are okay now. I don't know.
Let me ask you this, because this is what every wrestling fan wants to know. Content wise, first of all, I'm gonna jump ahead of this before anybody else can. Like, I hate. Are we gonna go back to the Attitude Era? Are we gonna see boobies again? Like, I'm not talking about that, but let's talk about things like the Hell in the Cell last night when the blood happened. Are we gonna see a more sports-based presentation where it's like, hey, whatever happens in the ring is going to happen, and we're not gonna lean so hard on the PG thing?
Gosh, that's to be determined. As a fan, you would hope so, but as a conglomerate corporate entity, like I would say the outlook not good. But I don't know, man. I don't know the UFC. I know the UFC makes money. I know they've turned that investment into a lot of money.
Yes.
I will say, as a guy that's not a UFC lover, UFC never interests me ever.
I know that they have their fan base, and same could be said for wrestling people and non-wrestling people. But like the problem I always thought the UFC should have taken more from the WWE and their presentation, as far as, sort of more like a little bit more fancy trash talking, or something that would make me understand a personality from another. And I thought Vince coming into this situation where, I guess it's legitimate fighting. I'm sure there's always questions about boxing and UFC and everything about finishes, but when you have Vince in there, are they going to sort of take a little bit more of a stance at the UFC where, I don't know. I'm just saying, I think it would help their business if me as a person that's mainstream, that doesn't really know anyone from this era of UFC, because they all look the same to me and no one really stands out. Maybe you should have some people stand out a little bit more, because I remember the days of I'm going way back, Tank Abbott, Chuck Liddell, Shamrock, Severn. These are people I knew because they had unique looks, unique things. They talked. I knew stuff. I mean, I had friends. This is going to be interesting because I have friends that love UFC, hate WWE, and maybe they'll be completely separate and you'll never see any kind of cross, and they're just under the same parent company, whatever. But I had people that hated when Brock Lesnar won the UFC heavyweight championship, because then he started cutting promos after the match where he's going to go screw his wife and drink Coors Light and all this stuff. And he hated that promo because he thought it made it look like pro wrestling, and it like took away some legitimacy of the sport. And I was just like, no, it actually, I look at it completely different. I'm interested in it now. I don't care about your same dudes that are tatted up, shaved heads, that don't talk and they just choke each other out in 2 minutes. I'd rather have a little bit more pizzazz to it. And maybe they'll add that, maybe they won't. But it is a sad day from a standpoint of a fan, because I do think things are going to change. I don't think it's going to be even more corporate now, isn't it, Gabe? I mean, is it really going to go? I don't think you're going to see anything ECW to WWE Attitude Era level anytime soon.
No, I think they probably will, because it's all about sponsorships, right? They'll probably dial back on the mitigating, like, again, Finn Balor getting busted. They're probably going to let that slide, because again, they're not gigging themselves. They're not going after this like AEW John Moxley bleeds when he sneezes kind of routine. But they're, I can see them tailoring back on that. But, they had a Cinnamon Toast Crunch sponsorship that probably brought them a ton of money. I mean, and again, there are sponsors that would jump on if they were more progressive, quote unquote, with violence and sexuality, that they could get on board. But that's not going to bring as much money. I mean, I remember you telling me something famously in one of our private conversations, actually, now that we're talking about it, when I was running Journey Pro, and I said, I want to cater to the over 18 crowd, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, yeah, but kids bring parents, they bring money. And there's there's a lot of truth to that. There's a lot of truth in, like, if you let the kids in the door, you got maybe a more potential for merch money, and you got more potential for them to bring their friends, so there is an angle there that I think like WWE doesn't want to let go of.
That is a weird, but that has changed since I said that to you from the first time, because when I was promoting and when WWE was big in my childhood, obviously it was family oriented.
Right.
It was obviously kayfabe was still around. There was stuff that still made it more of a family event. Then it became the ECW crowd, which I was proudly an ECW lover, but I was also in my late teens or early 20s, and I wasn't married, didn't have kids or anything like that. So the only people at those shows were, I mean, there was, ECW never had a huge house. Okay, they just had a bunch of like rabid fans. And so the indies now are interesting because, like you said, yes, if you want more butts and seats, you need to have kids with families there, because you get kids, the dad and mom will come, and then they might like it too, but they'll always bring the kids. And I had a lot of that when I was promoting. But now, yourself, Strider, Conrad Thompson, what they can find out is, but the 21-year-olds that went to ECW are now existing now, and they're willing to spend $300 per show, even though there's like a fifth of what used to be there, but they're going to spend way more money than even parents that are like, penny pinching with their 5 kids at the show. So I don't, it's depending on what, demographic you're going towards, but I've always been a big fan, and I've always thought that WWE should go back to not PG, but like,
I always thought they should go back to 80s style for a while and then build back up, because like when I was saying that was at the point where everyone was about to kill themselves in, ladder matches and TLC matches, and everybody's about broken in half, and take the moves back a little bit and make more storylines. But as we've said, in today's culture, it's not the easiest to have storylines that aren't offensive to people straight out the gate. So it's a hard call. If I was Vince, I would have sold this no problem, from the standpoint of like, what can we do without offending anybody? It's really hard going forward. It's always the power. You got the family stuff with the bloodline, or you got the power where the evil dictator is trying to hold people down. That's an easy go-to of storyline in wrestling. But these other wrestling storylines that we all grew up on, if you grew up in the 80s and 90s, they're all gone.
Yeah.
So good luck. But that's why everybody's doing moves now. That's why it's become Cirque du Soleil to a degree.
Cirque du Soleil. All right, Chris. Well, we filibustered enough. Let's go ahead and tell them about the interview we got going on this week. And let's get to it.
Yeah, well, it's not as long of an interview this week because I caught our good friend Kraig Keesaman, and he is also known on the indie scene as Niles Planquet, the wine connoisseur. He is a good friend of ours, and he trained under Central State's legend, Sonny Myers. Now, Sonny Myers is known by a lot of people around here. He was the actual sheriff up in Buchanan County, I believe, and he was a huge celebrity in the northern part of Kansas City after his wrestling days. And you should see, even in my documentary, there's some footage of Sonny Myers as a referee. And I asked Kraig about this, like how he used to count. He would not get down on all fours to count. He would sort of count by lifting his foot up and hitting it against the ground like a horse, instead to three. But Sonny Myers was a multi-time champion, and everyone that knew Sonny loved Sonny Myers. I never got to meet him because he passed away before I was really in the area to be able to do any kind of interviews with him or anything. But Kraig got to learn under him. And you'll see in this interview, Kraig wasn't a huge wrestling historian before he started training with Sonny Myers. He didn't really know the significance of him, but obviously as years have gone by, his love and admiration for his trainer has gone through the roof. So, and you'll hear that in this interview. So it was great to catch up with Kraig and talk about his beginnings and talk about Central State's legend, Sonny Myers.
All right, let's get to that interview right now with our buddy Kraig Keesaman talking about Sonny Myers. We'll see you on the other side.
It's the worst territory.
Joining me now, a good friend of mine, a guy I owe a lot to in life, but a guy that I met like 15 years ago or so, and he's been a professional wrestler around the Midwest for a very long time. Also a wine connoisseur as well, both in and out of the ring. Kraig Keesaman. Kraig, thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, Kraig, this podcast is called The Worst Territory in the World, and it's called that because, as you know, a lot of people outside of the Midwest think that the Central States was a little bit of a doormat. And is that the way you took it? Do you find that people still feel that way, or maybe at least just in the past?
I feel from just talking to, the people who used to work the territories, the ones that are still around that I've had the privilege to meet, that, the general consensus was, unless you were a top dog here in the area like Harley or somebody, then it was not the best place to be.
Well, the reason why I wanted to have you on is because, of course, you've been wrestling in the Midwest for, decades now, I think I can say. But you also were trained by one of the biggest names in the Central States territory of all time, and his name was Sonny Myers. And I've heard you talk, and you mentioned Sonny for as long as I've known you. But I did want to get your perspective because Sonny passed away in 2007, and so I never got to meet him. I didn't get to interview him when I did the documentary in the Central States. I barely missed out on him. But what are your initial thoughts? And tell me how you got involved with Sonny Myers in the Midwest.
Well, I was introduced through Sonny through my martial arts instructor, John Coyle. I'd been doing martial arts since I was 11, and during the breaks of class, my brother and my friends, we would do, WWF stuff. So I was a big wrestling fan. We would do suplexes on the mats and elbow drops. It was set up in an old gymnasium. We do elbow drops off a stage and stuff, and it would make my instructor nervous, I think, more than angry. Eventually, as we got older, as wrestling fans tend to do, our move set got a little bit more intense.
Yeah.
But we started doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and I was 17, and he said, I'm going to introduce you to a guy I know here in St. Joe. He actually trains people to wrestle at the time. His son was trying to break into the business. So I met Sonny through him. I gave him a phone call. Didn't know what to expect. I showed up at this place in St. Joe called the Body Zone. It was a gym. I had a ring set up in a back room. I think they did boxing in it too, but it was a wrestling ring. And had my first, go at wrestling, which was very intense, but I loved it. I fell in love with it right away. And continued to show up to training 2 to 3 times a week, 3 or 4 hours a day. Start to know Sonny a little bit more. He was definitely a gruff old man at that point. He might have been his whole life.
Yeah.
But he definitely had a heart, and he loved what he did. He loved the business for sure. And he was, he's just one of those generations. He wrestled in, I think he broke in the 1940s or 50s. So he's like one of the pioneers of modern, TV wrestling and whatnot. And he definitely had a love for this business that was a little bit more, I'd say, kind of pure and unadulterated that a lot of people have today, where it's you can kind of go both ways on how you feel about entertainment and sports. He was a sport-minded guy. He loved this business as a competition, as a sport, as a true, a little bit more of a shoot style than it was.
Well, we'll get to his career in a little bit, but let's keep with your meeting Sonny Myers. So he was born in 1924. He was known as Harold Myers, but went by the nickname Sonny. He was from Savannah, Missouri, which is up north of St. Joe, and you're from that part of the woods as well. It seems like the guys that obviously did well here, Geigel was from Iowa, Harley was from northern Missouri as well, Sonny Myers, they were what you expect of a Midwesterner in that time. So when you go in there and you see Sonny Myers, and you said he was sort of a gruff guy, he was known in his later years to be one of the, I think, nicely put, like one of the slower referees around, because he had a couple, like he's had so many, I'm assuming he had a couple new knees and stuff like that. But how was he did he actually physically get in with you? I mean, was he one of these guys that was super hard on new guys? Like, how was he as a trainer?
Well, as a trainer, he was intense. So he would get in the ring. He had just had hip or knee surgery, and it's been, that was in 1999, so it's been over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I don't remember, and I was a strapping lad that was just in it for the moment, and then of course now I've been dropped on my head a lot, so I don't remember a lot of those details as clearly. But he was definitely a hands-on person. He would get up in the ring and show us the holds, and he would wrench on them. He would, like, that was one thing that really shocked me about going into this business, was thinking that I had an idea of what it was and then getting it completely reversed. The first 3 months of our training was literally shoot wrestling. It was escape drills and amateur takedowns, and we didn't even do really body slams and stuff until later on, until he quote unquote smartened us up. And there was about 20 some people in my class, because he did it in classes, and by the end of those 3 months there was 2 of us left.
Wow.
And that's when he smartened us up, and it's like, now we're going to start doing a little bit of what wrestling is, what this wrestling is. And I was really relieved, because I was also very small back then. I was about 150, 60 pounds, and I was beat up. I had mat burns all over me. I was bruised all the time, and I just had the young kid feeling factor. But and I was dumb, so I just kept coming back. But he was definitely gruff. I mean, he was the guy that would tell you, hey, it's the shits, do it again. He wouldn't sugarcoat a thing. He would just say, this is awful, that was terrible, go do it again, and do it again. And if you did it right, he'd be like, that's great, now do it again to make sure it wasn't a mistake or an accident. And that's just how he was. He was great, and he would drive us. We weren't allowed to drink water. We weren't allowed to do any of that. It was like truly what you would think is a TV old school coach from back in that day. That's who he was.
Oh man, that makes me understand exactly why you are the way you are and how you think about the business. Because if you're brought up that way, which today, by the way, they'd get in trouble the way that you can't do that anymore. Which is in some ways I understand that some people took it a little too far, but I mean nowadays it's completely the other way. So you don't get that training where nowadays people that have schools, and correct me if you disagree with this, but they do it to make money, not to get rid of everyone except two people that are really good at it.
Right. They there's no more really trying to run anybody out of the business because wrestling is for everyone. That's the thing.
That's what they say. I don't agree with that, but that's what they say. Yeah.
I wholeheartedly don't agree with it, and I've been in the ring with a lot of people that don't need to be in the business, but or work with people in the industry that don't need to be in the industry.
Sure.
But it was more protected back then. I understand the mentality. That's where a lot of those guys made their money. So, Harley, for instance, Sonny, those guys made a living off of wrestling, which is something that very few people can honestly do unless they're signed under a contract now.
Sure.
Those guys necessarily signed under a lot of contracts. They were contracted at different places, but they didn't have they weren't an exclusive to Vince or anything back then because there wasn't that back then. And so it was just a different mindset for wrestling back then. And again, it's definitely affected how I view the business and how I continue to try and treat the business. Although I have to adapt because, like you said, you can't get away with the same stuff that they used to do back then.
So you're such a student of the game and you enjoy the vintage stuff of wrestling and the old school mentality of stuff. So you had absolutely no idea who Sonny Myers was when you got involved, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
so you weren't like a born and bred I love Central States wrestling fan growing up as a child.
No, in fact, the only thing I knew of wrestling up until my junior high area was WWF. We lived in a rural area. We had a big giant satellite dish.
The big satellites that you could dial in and get all the pay-per-views and stuff back in the 80s, yes.
Yeah, sometimes get them. Like if the reception was good, if there was a classic guy, we had to watch the rewrite, but we didn't have the internet. I didn't have the internet back when I was a kid. So there wasn't the dirt sheets or anything like that. You had to read the magazines, and I never read the magazines. I didn't.
Sure.
My magazines were Nintendo Power and comic books and stuff back when I was a kid. But I remember getting on the school bus one day, and my friend that we collected comic book cards, the trading cards, and he had his book, so he brought his collection in, and he turned to the back, and there was these wrestling cards, and I'm like, well, who's that? He's like, well, that's Sting. I said, who's Sting? And I was probably 14, 15. I had no idea who Sting was because I'd never seen it. I'd never seen WCW or any of that. So it wasn't until after I started training, and really it was a few years after I started training that I really started kind of looking back at the history, because when I first started, I was just so focused on learning how to do wrestling.
Sure. Did you, being up in the San Joe area, of course, I always love to talk about that area, not only because of Sonny, but also Gus Karras was around there, and also you had Lord Littlebrook and his sons wrestling as sort of what the midget wrestling capital of the world was St. Joe for a while. Did you ever meet any of those guys, have any interaction with them?
Oh, yeah. So shortly after I started training with Sonny, we were at the Body Zone. Something happened and the gym closed down, or some other promoter did something and made the guy mad, so they weren't allowed to have wrestling in anymore. You know how that works.
That's a normal tale.
That's a normal tale. It was very predominant here in the Midwest. But so we went to Lord Littlebrook's house. He had a garage and he had his ring set up. And so I met Brooke, and then Kato and Bobby, and then everyone else on that was there, Little Tokyo. And we would go there, 2 or 3 times a week. And it was always a running joke is that if Brooke would, if he would solicitate one of you and give you a story, you were the one that had to run down to the gas station and buy the 24-pack of beer for him. So he would see who would listen to the story, and then he would tell a great story. But then after the story, he'd be like, here's $10, $15, go get me a 12-pack of beer or whatever.
And that was your duty after you heard such a good story.
Oh yeah,
sure.
Oh yeah. So a lot of times, it was whether if you wanted to sit and listen to a story, or if you wanted to get to training, because Sonny would always criticize us for going and getting a beer because he didn't need the beer, according to Sonny. And then we would miss the first part of the training, so our training would be even worse because he'd make us do double drills if you missed warm-ups or whatever. So, but it was a good, that was the relationship they had too. And sometimes Sonny would talk to him, and it was good to get them around the table and talking and telling old stories and whatnot, just the different perspectives. Because Sonny was the competitive sports person, and Brooke was more the entertainment because he's the midget.
Sure.
So he was more into that, the more, I guess, more of a modern mindset on wrestling, but he still had the old school philosophy. So it's good to hear him talk back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, did they sort of tag team in a way? I guess they were good friends enough to obviously use his ring at his house. So I mean, did they? That would be an interesting combination. You had a super old school, known shoot fighter guy going on with a midget that had been on WrestleMania 3 and, had obviously been a special attraction feature in all these cards. So having those two together would give you sort of a nice, well-rounded education, really.
Yeah, it was cool. It was just different. Looking back at it now, I wish I could go back in time and listen to it again with the mind that I have now, versus being just a kid that's absorbing everything,
Sure.
But yeah, it was definitely cool to hear the different stuff, because Sonny did big things, but so did Brooke, and arguably Brooke did bigger things than Sonny did because he went out farther than the Midwest.
Sure.
Which is again part of the reason why the Midwest was one of the worst territories. They were so isolated from everywhere else.
Huge territory, long drives, longer than a lot of them anyway, not as long as some. But yeah, it was a wide open country and not a lot of population, So that's why they didn't make as much money, and that's why people like Cornette don't necessarily love the Central States territory. But what did Sonny talk about? What did he give you information-wise as a worker? Like, did he give you a lot of like how he got in the business and his attitudes? And I was always curious about his relationship with the Geigels and the Harley races at the time.
He was broken with Gus Karras, is who trained him, and
Sure.
he called him Greek. That Greek guy, Gus Karras, trained him. And like back then, it's interesting because now we have in wrestling we have a modern psychology. We kind of have the right way to do a lot of the same things, and things are kind of more mechanical on how they're taught. So, everyone does a hip toss very similar. Everyone does. The psychology is kind of similar.
Sure.
But Sonny was part of the era where it was more pioneering that. So they were developing that as they worked. They were trying to figure out what worked for psychology, how to make this stuff work, how to make this go, and how to make it convincing. I mean, they would work 3-hour Broadways. A lot of time there'd be 3 matches on a card, and they would work a 3-hour Broadway. And
wow.
He'd talk about working a headlock for 3 hours, and the people were just, they would eat it up. And then you see clips of it and you see that, like you see, wow, people really did eat it up because it was just a different era and a different atmosphere,
Sure.
Philosophy wise, he would talk about Gus being a good promoter. He never talked about his training being good or bad. So I don't know what that was at. I think a lot of that training back then was you just got in and did it.
Sure. Trial by fire, basically.
As far as his relationship with like Geigel or Harley, I think regardless whether they liked each other or not, and I have a suspicion that most of the people involved in any territory that worked closely with each other, that were top draws, probably to a core did not care for each other back then, because you were competing with each other.
Super competitive, man. You see it even today at the highest levels. I mean, people that, maybe not as much now, but you saw it even as, the Attitude Era when you have the Sean Brett type people. Those rivalries were born out of being super competitive.
Right. And I think it was even more so back then because, that was just the draw. That was the money that they made. But I think on the flip side of that too is that they all had a great respect for each other, and even more so for the business for the wrestling business. And so whether they got their way or not, if it was best for business, they were able to suck up their pride enough to do it most of the time.
Why did Sonny never leave the Midwest? You mentioned that. And a lot of guys, that was normal. You know, some of these guys that could have been big stars, like a Mike George, didn't necessarily want to go, hours away, had children, and they wanted to be more of a family guy. What was Sonny's reason?
Well, I think the big thing for Sonny was, because he did a lot of stuff in Texas, and he worked in Minnesota. Ed Sharkey was telling me stories about him just a few months ago when I wrestled on a show up in Michigan.
Yeah.
Or Minnesota, I'm sorry. I think the big thing is he settled here. He got married. He had kids. And he was successful here. He could be here and be successful with the business. So he didn't have to go out everywhere else and travel like, modern wrestling or guys even in the late 80s and 90s had to do. Is they had to just go from territory. They had to work those territories, and get out and get their name known. Back then, there wasn't as much outreach with wrestling. So, like, he wrestled in Chicago. Sonny was a big part of the Chicago wrestling scene for a long time. They would film it, and then it would be syndicated national, on national TV. So they take that Chicago, and they would play it everywhere. And that's just, now it's local. Every promotion that's local now runs locally. Or on, there's so much of it out there streaming that you can't even call it national.
Sure.
It is, but it's, it's isolated because no one's just going to sit and, hey, let's see what Midwest wrestling looks like today.
No, I don't see that very often. But what about, did he talk about the Central States in general? Like, he was a 14-time Central States champion, a NWA Missouri champ. Like you said, he held some titles in Texas, and I'm not meaning to say he never traveled out of Kansas City, but what I mean is, he wasn't going all in, and I'm going to go work everywhere I possibly can to become the top of the mountain. And I think you hit on it. A lot of those guys back then, see, we lose perspective now because now everyone has to travel around to keep themselves busy. But back in the day, you could just feast on just your one territory, and it was okay. I understand that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I think that's probably the biggest part of it. Like, I think if Sonny was around today in the prime of his life, he would be traveling everywhere because it's just what you have to do.
Sure.
If you really want to make it in something big.
So did he talk about Central States? Did he talk about working here? Did he say he enjoyed it? Did he say he wished he could have done more? Like, what were his overall thoughts? And what did he talk about as being a referee at the end of his career?
He loved the Central States. He loved this area. He, obviously he would talk like wrestlers do. He'd talk about people in their Central States. He'd talk about people that he liked, people he didn't like, or times he didn't like them. I think, again, at the end of the day, they all respected each other. So, but there definitely were times when certain people he didn't care for and vice versa, I'm sure. He liked how the Midwest was run when Gus ran it. He wasn't as big of a fan when, doggone it. Geigel, yes. When Geigel took over and then Harley was helping Geigel run that part, he wasn't a big fan of that. And I think that's the general consensus with a lot of the old-time workers that worked here is once that kind of happened, it became very political and very centered on just the select few. He understood it, but he was always griping about something. He was an old man. He's a grumpy old man, so he liked to gripe about all that stuff. But from general, he loved working the Midwest area, and I mean, he probably worked it at the time when it was the hottest it's probably ever been, probably ever will be again.
Oh, sure. In fact, when I was doing research on him, they talked about, because I got to interview Richard Brown, who was the son of Orville Brown. And if you go all the way back to the 40s, Orville Brown was a champion for the NWA, and he lost the title to Sonny Myers. But right after that, they sort of changed positions, and they redid the NWA, and Orville Brown was still the quote-unquote champion at the time, sort of wiping Myers out of the record book, which I think he went into lawsuits about that, and, there was some antitrust things going on that he's talked about. I guess he won some money from that, but that was, on paper, he should have been an NWA champion.
Yeah, in fact, I think, again, I haven't done my research. I think he was actually supposed to be credited as the first NWA. I think it was NWWA or something back then, and then it changed.
It went from like November of 47, they changed the belt, and in early 48, the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance, was formed. New sort of name, same letters, and like it became, it was back to Orville Brown as if nothing had happened. Now, back then, it was a lot easier to do that because you don't have the internet and everything else. So you could just sort of, sweep this stuff under the rug, a short title reign for Sonny. But either way, he was looked at and regarded high enough to become an NWA champion back in the 40s,
right,
when it was a huge deal.
And I've heard several things on that. Now, his lawsuit with the NWA, and again, I don't know a lot of the details on, but what I do know is about contractual obligations and pay. Mm-hmm. So that's where he was having things saying that I believe that he was
suing a promoter out of Des Moines named Pinky George, and right. I think Pinky he made him mad or something. He said you'd never work again, and I believe that caused Sonny to sue him for basically doing like a antitrust, sort of having a monopoly in the area. And right. It said he sued for $600,000, but he took over almost $100,000 from him, but he had to sign like basically a version of an NDA after that. But right. But yeah, no, it's fascinating to look at how that stuff worked before everybody knew everything with a camera on their phone and could read everything, instantaneously. But I remind me if I'm right, Kraig, wasn't he? I've seen videos of Sonny as a referee standing the entire time and counting with his foot. Is that correct?
Yeah. Oh yeah, he would do that. So
I love that.
I've heard multiple people talk about that. There was a reason why they would. Like the NWA people would continue to book him, and promoters would continue to book him because they wanted their guys to slow down. So, like, it was forcing their young talent he was inadvertently teaching them how to slow down by just being slow on himself.
That's hilarious.
But if you watch some of the other matches, like the Funk and Harley title match, he's moving okay as a ref. He is still slow counting, but everything was a little bit slower back then too. But yeah, on other matches, he just didn't care. He didn't care at all. He would stand in the corner and put his fingers up 1, 2. You can tell if your shoulder's down or not from standing, I guess. So
it's just hilarious. I've seen video of him doing that in the late '80s when he was reffing for Central States. I think there's video on the documentary where he's standing and he's just doing the old Mr. Ed kick. It's just funny, man.
Just knowing Sonny, I would bet that most of the time he did that is because he was like, well, that was the shit. That's not even gonna bother getting down for that.
I wish there were more people like that now.
Oh, I know. Me too. I'm listening. What?
I know you have a successful wine company to deal with here in a minute, but a couple more questions. Let me ask you about when he left wrestling, and obviously still reffed, but then he became a sheriff, or at least a deputy in Buchanan County in the 70s, which reminds me of when Dr. D. David Schultz became a bounty hunter. It seems like a perfect thing for a wrestler to go do that, which a lot of the boys went and were security at the Woodlands at the dog and racetrack. I guess Sonny never got roped into that. Geigel, maybe that was a real sign that he wasn't friends with Geigel, that he wasn't down there working with the rest of the guys. But he was at least a deputy up there. Did he talk about that at all?
Oh yeah, he was a sheriff, and he's still well known as being the sheriff of Buchanan County, St. Joe. He was, and I've heard multiple stories. So he was a guy that when you got arrested and they put you in jail, he left the door open. He never locked them in. He's like, if you guys want to think you can get by, come on by. And he would rough up people. And, like when I met him, he was working security or a door greeter, not security, a door greeter at Walmart.
Wow.
And he got let go because he tackled a shoplifter.
Wow, you try to stop somebody.
Oh well, you couldn't. You couldn't back then. You know that. You can't do it now. But
oh god,
he put him down and was making the guy squeal. I guess having a hammerlock or some sort of hold. I wasn't there, but that's the story I heard. So they had to let him go. But yeah, he was just if you ever saw him, his ears were big old elephant ears. They're all fired out, and he was just. He was a big guy. He was a big guy even at 70, in his late 70s.
So He died at the age of 83 in 2007. I'm assuming you went to his funeral, and like I don't exactly know. It said he had a 2-month illness. I don't know exactly how he passed away, but 83 is a pretty good life for a professional wrestler. What do you remember about the end of his life?
The end of his life was, he was basically training. He would come with us to shows. There was a promoter up here named Jake Hook that was running shows for All-Star Wrestling. It was Sonny Myers All-Star Wrestling, and Sonny would go and he'd do referee, or he'd sit at the desk or the commentator table or the ringside table, just as a face. But we'd run St. Joe and Atchison, Kansas City, Kansas.
Man.
He was, he was Sonny till the very end. I believe what it was, I think he got a staph infection. He had knee surgery, another knee surgery, and he was doing good, and then he got a staph infection, and that's what ultimately did him in. He just couldn't kick it.
Yeah.
But he, up until the very end, I remember going and seeing him in the hospital several times before he passed. He was still Sonny. He was watching whatever TV show and commenting. It wasn't just wrestling that he shit on. He shit on everything. Like every modern TV show, he would say, "Well, look at that," or something like that. It was good. I love that perspective, and I wish there was more people that still had that kind of perspective.
Oh man! So what's your lasting legacy of Sonny Myers as not only just a teacher but a guy here in the Midwest?
Oh, I think Sonny was one of a kind for sure. He was definitely a carny. He did own a carnival at one point. They had a traveling carnival that when he did a short stint where he quit wrestling or stopped doing wrestling, he bought a carnival, rides and everything. He would travel from small town to small town and set up carnivals. And he, at one point, when he was, one of the funny stories of him being the sheriff was that the state or the city, I can't remember which one, bought a whole bunch of trees to plant like in the medians and stuff for the highways. And they went missing, like hundreds and hundreds of trees. Well, the last part of his life, he opens a tree farm. So
wow, shocking.
Shocking, right? So because he had property and he had a farm and would grow vegetables and bring in vegetables and things all the time for us and stuff. He was definitely a one-of-a-kind guy, for sure.
I'm assuming the love that people had for Sonny Myers made them not hunt him down for being a tree thief. I can only assume.
Correct. Well, and I think it's one of those things that was just so bold and brass that they probably thought that was great. They're probably like, wow, this city screws us enough. At least let someone stick it back to him that can get away with it.
My goodness, man, he sounds like quite a character. I wish I would have been able to meet him before he passed. But I knew that you always talk so highly about him and say so many great things about him that I knew you'd be a good person to come on and talk to about. So thanks for joining me today, Kraig Keesaman, who known as Niles Planquet out on the wrestling circuit all around America. You obviously try to emulate him every time you go out.
Oh, yeah. I do a lot of things. Like, I'll make sure I throw an atomic drop in. That was his finish. Shocking kids listening that are in wrestling today. That was his finish at one point. It's an atomic drop, not just a setup. But I try and throw that in there. He used the sleeper. He kind of got famous here in St. Joe and the Central States for using the sleeper hold. So I will throw that in every once in a while.
Sure.
But definitely, he was a big guy on like doing backdrops and things like that, which are something I like to use a lot in my matches. So
yeah, for some reason, a lot of guys don't like taking those, really.
Yeah, a lot of guys need to get better training.
Well, if only they had only had Sonny Myers. So
if they only had Sonny Myers, that's right.
Well, thank you very much for joining me, Kraig. I appreciate it. I'll see you soon, buddy.
All right, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
It's the worst territory.
All right, welcome back to the worst territory in the world. Chris, that was a great interview with Kraig Keesaman. Now, we could do a whole hour just with Kraig talking about his experience in the Central States territory, but some of my first stories from people around this area was actually from Kraig about Sonny. So that was really great to hear an interview more in depth about Sonny Myers.
Yeah, no, he could talk about Sonny all day. And like I said, he doesn't necessarily have the historical perspective as much as he had just his like personal dealings with him and the stories he told about training with Lord Littlebrook and having to use their ring with the midgets up there. Was like, he's had some great I mean, you're talking about a kid from, rural Missouri deciding to get involved. He had martial arts background, deciding to get into wrestling, meets Sonny Myers, who he has no idea who he is at the time, really, and then gets to train with Lord Littlebrook and Little Tokyo and the likes. I mean, it would have been quite the introduction to pro wrestling. And but of course, Kraig Keesaman's a great friend of ours, and yes, I'd like to have him on just to talk about obviously the NWL, because he still uses his gimmick from the Kansas City days of NWL, Niles Planquet, which has gotten him the most, I think, coverage ever in his wrestling career.
Yeah, Niles one of the smartest guys for the business that I've ever met.
Oh yeah,
as far as wrestling knowledge, and he always had a deep appreciation for what was going on in the NWL. And honestly, my first friend that was a wrestler was Kraig. Actually, me and him got along on multiple levels, so that was really awesome. All right, Chris. Well, we're going to wrap this up, as you got things to get to, I got things to get to, but we love to do a little segment at the end here. So, Goff, I'm going to let you pick the left hand or the right hand. That's all you get this week. And each one.
Let's go. I should go right, but I'm going to go left.
All right. All right. So the left hand actually is the easiest one, which is good. Chris, top to bottom, we talked about WrestleMania, top to bottom. Sure. What is your least liked or most hated WrestleMania, and why?
Oh, wow. Well, I can only tell you, like, WrestleManias to me, this is really bad. WrestleManias to me only matter through like the mid-20s. So I mean, it's really, my WrestleMania loving WrestleMania days probably ended sometime around 2009. So that was like 26, I believe. I did go to that one. It was I believe that was one in Arizona where it was Shawn Taker 2. But anyway. My worst, the worst WrestleMania, I think, through that time, God, there's several. 11 and 13 are both pretty bad. Now, 13 has a great match, okay?
Yep.
But the rest of the card, not so much.
Yep.
And 11 was not great either. That was the Lawrence Taylor Bam Bam, then Diesel Shawn sort of co-main events. And I'm a big Shawn fan. But that was just sort of a weak time in the company. 10 has grown on me through the years, but I used to not like 10 very much. But I got to sort of enjoy that more because that was sort of Randy Macho Savage. Like, it was like his last real big match on a Mania card. I would probably, if gun to my head, I'd probably say the one I've watched the least would be 13.
Wow. I was going to go with 9.
See, I like the spectacle of 9.
Really? Oh,
I like the outside of
terrible.
It was, and I did not like the finish with Hogan and and all that.
Giant Gonzalez Taker. I mean, there was some garbage on that show.
I give that more extra credit than I should, just because it was outdoors at Caesar's Palace, which would never happen again, like in that way. But I just, having Bobby Heenan riding out backwards on that, that kind of stuff was great. I mean, they were all dressed in togas. Like, it was just the gimmickry of it was so off the charts, like sort of like corny, stupid, that it was fun. But yeah, that was the Doinks. And that was, I think that was Shawn Michaels taking on, was it Tito, Matador? It was, I'm trying to remember who it was. It was because that was when he had the mirror in the ring with Sherry.
Yes.
But
and that was Narcissist, his first WrestleMania.
Yep. Narcissist. Yeah, it was. He always hit the wrong syllable sometimes on that. Vince did, but Two is like very, I love 2 just from the standpoint of I watched the crap out of that as a kid, but 2 overall, not great. 2 is not great.
Yeah.
With the 3 city thing did not fly.
Right.
But 1 being what it was unbelievable, because that was just, the significance of that. Yeah, I really can't say anything bad about. 3 is arguably the best ever.
I was just about to say 3 is probably the best.
17 is probably my favorite. But I think that's the best ever. But 3 is right there.
Oh,
as a child, it was 3.
Oh my God!
I can watch 3 over and over and over, and 17 in that era was so good, so much better than everything else. My friend, Seth, my buddy, he hates 19. He thinks that's the worst. And a lot of people don't say that because that was Brock Angle and Hogan and Vince, you know,
Right.
and
Right.
you know, it was I don't know them and a lot of people said that's grown through the years on their radar. So what's your least favorite? You'd say 9?
Yeah, I would say 9. 13 is up there. 13 is up there. Which one is the one with the Iron Man match? The highly that match was
That was 12. That was
12.
12.
I did not like that match. And I was like, oh, everyone's got to do holds and wrestling. Like, even as a kid, I hated that match. I hated that. I was bored to tears.
They're just boring because you know nothing's going to happen till the last minute. You know, it's just how they all are. I mean, we've had some Iron Man matches on the indie scene, and you know, even though they were well wrestled matches and like everyone was into it, I think you're still sort of fighting against the fact that everyone knows nothing's really. It's going to come down to the last 10 seconds or whatever is really going to happen. So, sort of foreshadowing that is not good for the actual match. But
9 for me was just so unwatchable. I mean, as a kid, of course, I liked Bobby the Brain Heenan, and I even liked, you know, the Giant Gonzalez match. I'm like, oh my God, Undertaker, you know, like you taking out this big guy. Yeah.
You're a kid, so it's.
I mean, my personal favorite, because of the fact I was a kid, was 7. There was nothing bigger in my school. There was nothing bigger in my life than Warrior versus Hogan. That was the be all. I remember everybody at my school talking about that the next day. Like they were like, oh my God, did you see Warrior versus Hogan? Oh my God. You know, that to me was my favorite. I have such fond memories of that card.
So 9, it was Tatanka and Shawn Michaels. That was in Sherry. Yes, I remember that. So Tito actually opened it against Papa Shango. But
see, that card is trash.
This is trash. So the Steiner brothers and the Head Shrinkers. Doink versus Crush with the double doinks. Razor Ramon and Backlund. Money. So Money Inc. versus the Mega Maniacs, which was no good.
Yeah.
Luger Perfect.
Oh.
Undertaker Gonzalez.
Perfect couldn't even save that one.
No. And then the finish of Yokozuna beats Bret Hart, and then Hogan beats Yokozuna. So yeah, it was no, on paper that's pretty bad. Yeah.
That's pretty bad. Yeah. And that was Jim Ross's debut.
Yes, it was, which in a toga. So that was always funny to look back at that.
Well, Chris, in closing, what was your favorite Starrcade card? Just kidding.
None of them. But
all of them. Correct answer. All of them.
I fell asleep during all of them, so I don't know.
Did you actually fall asleep during Starrcade cards?
No. I just never watched them really because I didn't watch that second rate crap. So you know,
it was way better than WWE, so it doesn't matter.
And I guess in the ring, but presentation and everything else was not true.
You don't like your arena smoke filled and dark? Come on.
I don't know. The graphics and everything else were so. I mean,
do you remember when there were so many Ric Flair's name with
wrong?
Yeah.
Can you imagine doing that? I can like when anything was wrong, you rarely saw anything ever wrong in a lower third on a WWE card. And that was because Vince would just absolutely kill you if that ever happened.
But you have this like laser show behind Ric Flair, and they spell his name wrong, dude. I mean, let's be honest. I love NWA, but they were riddled with production problems. Riddled.
Oh, they were, and they were part of it, and they were part of a television production business at that point. So I don't know why, but dude, just real fast, like 13's horrible. Billy Gunn versus Flash Funk. Okay, the Headbangers defeated Furnos Lafon, the Godwins, and the New Blackjacks. Horrible. Rocky Maivia defeated the Sultan. Horrible. Triple H defeated Goldust. That was probably okay. With China and Marlena. That's when I think she take. I can't remember when she had Marlena like a rag doll and threw around.
No, I think that was that. I think that was.
Owen Hart and Bulldog versus Mankind and Vader. That was probably okay. Bret Hart and Stone Cold, obviously great.
Perfect.
And then Ahmed Johnson and Legion of Doom taking on the Nation of Domination. And then Undertaker versus Psycho Sid. So I just
but see, I think that's a better card than 9. I think
you're probably right. You're right. On paper, it's probably better, but it's not good.
I was telling my wife last night. We were talking about the blood thing in Hell in the Cell, And I was telling her about the Austin Hart double turn. And I was like, I still cannot find that. I know when it happened. I cannot tell when Hart bladed Stone Cold.
Oh yeah, I know. That's when they actually tried to hide it.
It was masterful. I mean, I mean, some guys just saw their heads off now and it's no big deal. But like, I like slowed it down and I was like, click, 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 click. I'm like, I don't know when he actually bladed him. Like, I mean, again, Austin says the point in the match, this is where he gigged me, blah, blah, blah. I can't see it. I cannot see it. And that's what I love about wrestling. When the magic, you can't find it. And
that's great.
That match is perfect from top to bottom. Perfect.
I have to bring this up, Gabe, before we leave. Like, syringe to the penis, okay? So what is the next level? Because I think the only orifice not used at this point, to my knowledge, I don't think Effie has ever done this. Has anything been stuck in someone's butthole? I mean, because yes. I think that's the only – there has been. Okay. Because that's the last orifice that I think can really be dealt with at this point.
They do the thumb in the butt spot. So if that counts.
Okay. No, I thought I was confused because I remember Effie did something with Marco's stunt, and I thought that had something to do with that. But then really that was just Marco putting a dildo in his mouth, I believe. So
yes. Yep.
Okay, but the penis to the syringe to the penis spot. That's wait.
I'm
sure you watched it, right?
No. What I seriously.
Oh, you haven't seen this?
No.
Oh, okay. Well,
what is it?
You got to look it up. It's it's the latest XPW show where the guy. Someone took his pants down, his penis was hanging out, and he put a syringe in his penis.
You're lying.
No. Okay. I thought you were on top of things, but apparently you don't know this spot.
All right, hold on.
You'll have to watch that and get back to me.
Yeah. Well, do you know the workers who did it? Because I bet you I know who they are.
I don't know them at all. No, they look like a couple of guys that have a very bright future.
So you're telling me that they showed a man's penis and the syringe going into his penis.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
And is this where we're going? The guy turn it? Well, I don't know. That's why I guess I hit it out of left field here because I figured you had seen this before.
No.
But no, it was the guy had sort of like a jock strap on under. I don't know what it was. He had something on underneath his trunks. He was pulled down, and this guy put a syringe into his penis, and the dude had to take the syringe out of his penis, then pull his pants back up, and then continue the match. And that was not the finish. So I don't know. It was just a transitional penis syringe spot.
Okay, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That's
you can't find it. Maybe it's been scrubbed from the internet.
I haven't looked for it yet. I'm marveling in the stupidity of that. When you said I have to talk about this, I'm like, what do you like? I missed the opening comment, I guess, when you talked about syringe. Anyways, I'll look this up later. Wow. Oh my God, that's so stupid. Did it happen this weekend?
The wrestler whose penis got stabbed was named The Body. Okay. That's his name, The Body.
Okay.
Okay. But anyway, The Body was nothing really to really brag about. So I don't know why you would have that nickname. But anyway.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, we're gonna
a high note. I figured you would have known this coming, but no, I have not heard Cornette talk about this yet. Maybe he's just unlike us. Maybe he didn't want to bring it up and give them more attention, but I just figured you would have something to say about it. So
because you're like, well, my co-host loves shitty indie wrestling.
Well, yeah, you like garbage crap like that, like from a standpoint of you're fascinated by it. So there you go.
I am. No, you are 100% correct. I am. That's why I watch Bones matches. All right, and that will do it. That will do it for this week on the worst territory in the world. Please, please, please. We are now active and live on Facebook. Chris, what was that address one more time?
It's facebook.com/worst wrestling. And we are building an audience over there. So we can post our page. We can post our podcast on there, but also Central State's memories. And actually, I got a couple good leads on people that be on the show. Kevin Wall used to be an announcer for the later stages of Central State's wrestling. He now has a radio show in Las Vegas. Had no idea about that. Also, Bart Batten from the Batten Twins is still around. Sent a message to him. And, our own Gil Rogers hooked me up with Rip Rogers.
Wow.
And
Okay.
yeah, there's several leads have come from that. So I'm looking forward for more.
Yeah, and I haven't talked to Chris about this yet, but we are going to start trying to catch up with our YouTube, which you can find us. Look us up at Worst Territory, and we are the first search. Also, leave us a rating wherever you get your podcasting needs met. Give us a 5-star rating; really helps us get noticed. But the podcast is growing slowly but surely, and we really, really enjoy doing all these. We got a lot, like Chris just said, we got a lot of good interviews coming, and the participation from you guys has been off the charts on Facebook. So go ahead and follow us there. And yeah, that's it for us, and we will see you next week right here on the Worst Territory in the World. That's Chris. I'm Gabe. See you next time.
It's the worst